against my country, especially on Jammu and Kashmir, the Indian territory they covet. Our pioneering record on women, peace and security agenda is
India slams Pakistan during a UNSC debate on women, peace and security, condemns Pakistan's remarks as a delusional tirade, particularly over Jammu and Kashmir.
1971.
Trump says he will consult Department of Justice on possible pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell after Supreme Court rejects appeal to overturn her conviction for aiding Jeffrey Epstein in the sexual abuse of teenage girls.
Venezuelan President Maduro claims a local terror group planned to plant a bomb at US Embassy in Caracas amid a standoff over drug trafficking. Authorities foiled a false flag operation by suspected extremists.
French President Macron gives Prime Minister Le Cornu 2 days to salvage his administration after the premier resigns following less than a month in office in a move that plunged the country further into a political crisis.
Madagascar President appoints Army General Fasiambo as his new Prime Minister following days of youth-led protests that have thrown his country into crisis.
President Trump said 25% tariffs on medium and heavy trucks would begin November 1st. Trump had originally said that heavy-duty truck tariffs would start October 1st, but that timeline slipped as officials heard appeals from companies concerned about the impact.
And the Israel Premier Tech cycling team is set to drop Israel from its name starting next season, which comes after repeated pro-Palestinian protests against the team at recent races. And starting with the top focus this hour, which is on the Israel-Hamas ceasefire talks. Indirect talks aimed at reaching a final agreement on a US peace plan to end the war in Gaza have begun in Egypt.
Well, Egyptian state-linked media reports that the first round of talks between Hamas and mediators concluded in a positive atmosphere. According to Al-Qahira News, which is affiliated with Egypt's intelligence services, negotiations are set to continue on Tuesday. Meanwhile, an Israeli delegation arrived in the resort city of el-Sheikh on Monday.
And the talks, which will see Egyptian and Qatari officials holding shuttle meetings with delegations from both Israel and Hamas separately, come on the second anniversary of the Hamas attack on Israel that was on 7th of October 2023 that sparked the war. Al-Qahira News earlier said that delegations were discussing preparing ground conditions for the release of detainees and prisoners.
A Palestinian source close to Hamas leadership said the negotiations are set to be difficult and complex and may last for several days. Hamas has said it agrees to the peace plan proposals in part, but has not responded to several key demands, including its disarmament and future role in Gaza. But U.S. President Donald Trump told reporters at the White House that Hamas was agreeing to things that are very important. Listen to this.
If certain things aren't met, we're not going to do it. But I think we're doing very well, and I think Hamas has been agreeing to things that are very important.
President Trump has denied that he recently told Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to stop being negative about the proposal and take the win after Hamas accepted parts of Washington's proposal. Trump said it was not true, adding that Netanyahu has been very positive on the deal.
Now, Trump, whose envoy Steve Witkoff and son-in-law Jared Kushner are expected in Egypt, has urged negotiators to move fast to end the war in Gaza, where Israeli strikes continued on Monday. And according to Gaza Civil Defense Agency, at least 7 Palestinians were killed in the latest Israeli airstrikes. And for more on this, we are now being joined by Asha Castleberry. She is a former senior advisor at the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs at a U.S. State Department and a U.S. national security and foreign policy expert. It's always great to see you on the show.
Thank you.
Well, let's begin by asking you, how positive are you about this whole peace plan? We know that Hamas has agreed to it, but somehow in part, they have mentioned in part. How positive are you going forward?
Well, I must say there's a mixed review to it. There is some progression in terms of it's unprecedented that they are meeting in Egypt. And Egypt and the Qataris are aggressively ensuring that they implement the White House-led 20-point plan. So that's for one issue to definitely pay attention to. Another point, too, is just understanding or figuring out what is the future role of Hamas in a post-Gaza crisis. I think that is what really matters. In the plan, it looks like that there will be no leadership role, no role in the post-crisis environment, and just hand it all over to the Palestinian Authority. So as far as what President Trump mentioned, where he seems quite optimistic of what they're willing to negotiate with, it's all about definitely the role, their future role in that post-crisis environment, I must say.
Yes. Ms. Castleberry, that's exactly what I was coming to next about the governance of Gaza, which is going to be a point of contention between the two sides. But other than that, what do you have to say about the other point that's mentioned in the proposal, which is giving up on arms? Do you think Hamas would be willing to give up arms as far as this proposal is concerned?
Yes, the proposal pretty much underscores the demilitarizing of Gaza, and that includes Hamas giving up a lot of its its military equipment, its military posture throughout the Strip. So I think that Hamas will relinquish that posture overall, but in exchange, what do they get out of it as far as being able to relinquish most of its military posture? And another point too is the Palestinian Authority. As far as once they give that up, how does that shape the role of the Palestinian Authority? But what really matters here is the role of the international community, especially the regional players. How they're going to send in the security force, which comes off like they're trying to be a neutral force that will take over the post-crisis environment. And I think that's unprecedented compared to previous agreements. And I think that's definitely shaping the outcome of this, where it's going to most likely be successful. But overall, when it comes to agreements, with regards to Middle East policy, implementation is always the tricky part of it. An agreement we can get to, but implementation is what makes it harder. Like, for instance, there were airstrikes that happened recently and over the weekend. So implementation is really going to matter.
Yes.
In that case, of course, we had Donald Trump also say that there were good talks with Hamas, and Hamas was agreeing to things that are very important. If you could just shed a light? What are the things that could have been important that Donald Trump is indicating there?
I think it all depends on their role, their future role in the Gaza Strip, as far as giving up most of its just its leadership, its role in the post crisis environment, in terms of handing it completely over to the Palestinian Authority, or working very closely with the Qataris and the rest of the international community, relinquishing a lot of itself from that, but continuously working on hostage affairs, as well as making sure that humanitarian aid is being sent to the people there, being still an instrumental or role in the post-Gaza crisis, but they're definitely determined to diminishing their role overall, and in doing so, it's by giving most of its role to the international community, mainly the regional players like Egypt and Qatar, to take over some of this their leadership role.
Yes, Ms. Castleberry, just last point that I wanted to touch upon before we let you go. This is about the earlier point you mentioned about the Israeli offensive, which still continues while the ceasefire talks have now begun. Now, despite President Trump even urging Netanyahu to stop carrying out military offensive while the talks are happening, the actions still continue. How do you think that is going to play out, given that the ceasefire talks are underway and there are deaths that are being reported every second day?
I think it's definitely going to be more monitored. Secretary Rubio talked about that point too, as far as it's very important to monitor, the logistical challenges, the ongoing issues or security challenges that are happening while doing these talks. So I think it's going to be more monitored and urged to please completely stop, in order to make this ceasefire proposal more effective. So, and you have right now social media monitoring these ongoing incidents. So they definitely will be monitored and be part of the negotiation piece.
Of course, we'll have to look forward to what comes out of these talks, and hopefully a positive one. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast and giving your perspective.
Thank you.
And of course, moving on, we shift our focus to the Russia-Ukraine war. With winter approaching, Russia and Ukraine are on a bombing campaign to cripple energy infrastructure.
And while Russia has escalated its assault on Ukraine's crucial energy infrastructure, Ukraine targeted largest oil refinery in Crimea and left Belgorod in complete darkness with its drone barrage. Our next report tells you how the energy war is in a critical stage at this point in time.
The Russia-Ukraine energy war is entering a dangerous phase. Moscow is intensifying its deadly assault on Ukraine's power infrastructure, a tactic of previous winters, a grim reminder of the suffering that left millions scrambling without heat and light in sub-zero temperatures. Kyiv claims Moscow launched 116 drones hitting an energy facility in Chernigiv region and killing one woman in Kherson. This comes a day after a deadly series of Russian strikes on Ukraine's western Lviv region. But the battle in the skies is far from over. Ukraine hit back with a barrage of drones. Flames pierced the night sky over the Russian city of Belgorod. Sirens wailed as emergency teams scrambled to douse raging fires. The Ukrainian attack damaged energy facilities and disrupted power supply, leaving 40,000 Russians in complete darkness.
Based on the results of the overnight work of our energy specialists and emergency services, currently there is a partial blackout in 24 settlements, affecting 5,400 people.
Russia's own energy infrastructure, once thought untouchable, is now under relentless assault. Ukrainian drones struck the Feodosia oil terminal in Crimea. The terminal, located about 250 kilometers from Ukraine-controlled territory, is the largest oil storage facility in Crimea. It can hold up to 250,000 tons of fuel, which supply Russian forces. Reports say Ukrainian drones have dealt a historic blow to Russia's oil industry. Nearly 40% of Russian oil refineries stand paralyzed, creating an unprecedented crisis in the fuel market. Ukraine targeted Russia's largest manufacturers of explosives, Bertlov plant in Zerzink. It has the capacity to produce almost all types of ammunition, from aircraft and artillery shells to warheads for anti-tank guided missiles and air defense warheads.
In recent days, Ukraine has been using exclusively Ukrainian products, not just drones. And from those strikes, I think people can understand, from the fragments that are on social networks, where drones were used and where non-drones were used.
Amid the ongoing battle, Russian President Vladimir Putin has issued a strong warning to President Trump against supplying Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine.
There were issues raised, such as discussions about supply of new weapon systems to Ukraine, including long-range and high-precision systems like Tomahawks. I have already said that this will lead to the destruction of our relations, or at least the positive trends that have emerged in these relations.
With peace talks stalled for weeks now, the question arises, how far will both sides go in the run-up to the horror of winters? Bureau Report, WION World This One.
And shifting focus to the US then, the government shutdown has entered its second week and the impact is being felt across the nation.
On Monday evening, a busy California airport had no air traffic controllers. Governor Gavin Newsom said that Hollywood Burbank Airport, which connects Los Angeles to the rest of the country, was set to be without qualified staff in the control tower for around 6 hours.
And Newsom even blamed President Trump for the shutdown. The Federal Aviation Authority said that departures to the airport were delayed by around 2.5 hours. But a spokesperson for the airport said operations are still continuing.
While most federal workers have been placed on enforced leave during the shutdown, those doing essential jobs like air traffic controllers are expected to continue to work, but without pay.
The development comes as a nationwide government shutdown enters its second week. Two rival bills attempted to end the U.S. government shutdown failed during evening voting in the Senate. A Republican bill gathered 52 affirmative votes and 42 as nays. Previously, the Democratic-led bill had 45 affirmative votes and 50 negative.
Well, 3/5 of the Senate were needed to approve the motions put forth. Democrats are demanding an agreement on extending expiring Obamacare health care subsidies and reversing cuts to health programs passed as part of Trump's signature One Big Beautiful Bill.
Republicans are now digging their heels with House Speaker Mike Johnson telling his members not to even report to Congress unless the Democrats cave in, insisting any debate over health care be held after reopening the government.
Well, President Trump on Monday opened what may be called a little window for discussion, saying he would be happy to negotiate a deal on health programs with Democrats, but demanded the federal government first be reopened.
But Democrat leaders in Congress denied that there are any negotiations with Trump. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said that the White House has gone radio silent since a meeting in the Oval Office last week. He also took a swipe at House Speaker Mike Johnson for keeping his fellow Republican House members on a break from Congress this week.
With members of Congress at home and no formal talks taking place in either chamber, a CBS News poll released Sunday showed the public blaming Republicans by a narrow margin for the gridlock. For more on this, our correspondent Susan Tarani sent us this report from New York.
On Monday, the Senate once again rebuffed a House-backed continuing resolution that would have opened the government until November 21st. All but 3 Democrats voted it down, so it failed to reach the 60 votes needed. The votes came on day 6 of the government shutdown as the Trump administration warned that continued funding lapse could trigger layoffs across federal agencies. White House officials have said that Monday may be the last chance to fund operations before reduction in force notices are distributed. President Trump and top aides said that the layoffs would predominantly hit Democrat agencies, placing the blame on Senate Democrats for this shutdown. Democrats, meanwhile, insist that any reopening deal must also address looming health insurance premium hikes under the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, a demand that Republicans refuse to take up until after the shutdown ends. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
And the Nobel Committee has announced this year's prize in medicine, but one of the winners might not know he has won.
That's right, Jyotsna, and the Nobel Committee has been unable to reach a winner of this year's prize for medicine who is living his best life on an off-the-grid hiking foray.
Fred Ramsdell is among the U.S.-Japanese trio who have won this year's Nobel Prize in Medicine for research into how the immune system is kept in check by identifying its security guards, but he's currently living off the grid.
And Ramsdell shared the prestigious prize with Mary Brunkow of Seattle and Shimon Sakaguchi of Osaka University in Japan for their discoveries related to the functioning of the immune system.
But the Ramsdell digital detox means the Nobel Committee has been unable to reach him and break the news. Jeffrey Bluestone, a friend of Ramsdell's and co-founder of his lab, said the researcher deserves credit, but he can't reach him either. Bluestone thinks that the Nobel laureate may be backpacking in the backcountry in Idaho.
The Nobel Committee has also hit a roadblock trying to reach Brunkow. Both researchers are based on the U.S. West Coast, which is 9 hours behind Sweden, but eventually got hold of her.
It was Shimon Sakaguchi who I reached. I got hold of him at his lab, and he sounded incredibly grateful and expressed that it was a fantastic honor, and he was quite taken by the news. Fortunately, I had a lot of information to give him, so that worked out okay. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to reach any of the other two.
Well, the work by the concerns peripheral immune tolerance that prevents the immune system from harming the body and has led to the new field of research and development of potential medical treatments now being evaluated in clinical trials.
The awardee trio includes Shimon Sakaguchi, a researcher at Osaka University who discovered a new class of T cells crucial for the body's defense. Brunkow, a senior project manager at the Institute for Systems Biology in Seattle, and Ramsdell, who's senior advisor at Sonoma Biotherapeutics, made the other key discovery in 2001.
Well, their pioneer work on peripheral immune tolerance revealed how a special class of immune cells known as regulatory T cells who act as guardians against autoimmune disease. The laureate's work answered the long-standing question by uncovering the mechanisms behind peripheral tolerance, the immune system's ability to avoid self-harm.
And following the announcement on medicine, the Nobel announcement for other disciplines are to follow through this week. The Nobel for Physics will be announced on Tuesday, Chemistry on Wednesday, and Literature on Thursday. The Nobel Peace Prize will be announced on Friday. The winner of Memorial Prize in Economics will be named on 13th of October. And it's time for a very short break on World DNA, but do not go anywhere. Lots coming up after we are back.
We talk about Syria, who has announced preliminary results of an indirect vote for a new parliament. And this has about 6,000 members of regional electoral colleges have voted to choose members of the country's transitional parliament. All the details on the other side.
Also coming up after we are back, the Indian Army has confirmed utilizing artificial intelligence during Operation Sindoor. More details on that after we are back.
India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One. From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building. Coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS Centenary Year, Syria at 100.
Hello and welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching World DNA with me, Jyotsna Kumar, and my colleague, Sumisha Srivastava. Let's begin with the headlines.
Every year we are unfortunately fated to listen to the delusional tirade of Pakistan against my country, especially on Jammu and Kashmir, the Indian territory.
India slams Pakistan during UNSC debate on women, peace and security, condemning Pakistan's remark as a delusional tirade, particularly over Jammu and Kashmir.
Israel marks second anniversary of October 7, 2023 attack as Hamas and Israeli negotiators hold indirect talks to end the two-year war in Gaza under a US President Donald Trump's proposed peace plan.
Donald Trump says he has sort of decided on supplying Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, but wants to know how they will be used after Russian President Vladimir Putin warns U.S. missile support to Kiev will destroy Moscow-Washington ties.
Donald Trump repeats his claim that he helped prevent a full-blown war between India and Pakistan earlier this week, this time citing tariffs as a reason for their truce.
Venezuelan President Maduro claims a local terrorist group planned to plant a bomb at U.S. Embassy in Caracas amid a standoff over drug trafficking. Authorities foiled a false flag operation by suspected extremists.
French President Emmanuel Macron gives Prime Minister Le Cornu 2 days to salvage his administration after the Premier resigns following less than a month in office in a move that plunged country further into political crisis.
OpenAI does not trade publicly, but the world's most valued startup is increasingly making waves in the stock market it has shunned. OpenAI's latest deal with Advanced Micro Devices sent the chipmaker's shares soaring above 30%.
South Africa respond to their crushing defeat by England with an impressive victory over New Zealand at the ICC ODI World Cup in Indore. Tasman Brid's century helped South Africa win by 6 wickets. And our top story this hour coming in from Syria, where the country has announced preliminary results of an indirect vote for a new parliament, which is a key step in the shift away from ousted leader Bashar al-Assad.
However, the vote has raised concerns about fairness and inclusivity under the country's new leadership. Now, on Sunday, about 6,000 members of regional electoral colleges voted to choose members of Syria's transitional parliament from pre-approved lists. Now, this vote fills nearly 2/3 of the new 210-seat parliament, which will serve a renewable 30-month term. President Ahmed Shah will appoint the remaining 1/3 of the members later.
The number of seats filled in these elections is 119 out of a total of 140 seats. Of course, elections were not held in the provinces of Raqqa, Hasaka and Sweda, in addition to the Ain al-Arab area.
The Electoral Commission spokesperson said that only 4% of the 119 members selected are women, noting that the number is not proportionate to the status of women in Syrian society and that their role in political, economic and social life. The Commission had previously said women made up 14% of more than 1,500 candidates.
We've tried hard to support women's presence in Parliament through awareness-raising campaigns, but we haven't succeeded. Perhaps this is the Syrian reality. In the next phase, there must be greater awareness-raising across Syrian society.
Najmi said only 2 Christians were among the winners, calling the representation weak considering the proportion of Christians in Syria. He said that perhaps the president's third could compensate for some underrepresented components of Syrian society, but rejected any quota system.
Seats in southern Syria's Druze-majority Sweda province, which suffered sectarian bloodshed in the month of July, and the Kurdish-led north as well as northeast are outside Damascus control and were excluded from the process.
On March 10, Syria's Kurds and Damascus agreed to integrate Kurdish-administered civil and military institutions in the country's northeast into the state by the year's end. But negotiations on implementing the deal have stalled.
Also, in another development, Syrian state television reported that at least one member of the country's domestic security forces, as well as a civilian, were killed in bombings in the northern city of Aleppo, which were blamed on Kurdish forces.
And the Indian Army has confirmed utilizing artificial intelligence during Operation Sindoor, a counter-terror operation conducted in Pakistan in May.
Also, according to Lieutenant General Rajiv Kumar Sani, the operation showcased the potential of artificial intelligence, enabling the Indian Army to successfully target enemy positions and terror infrastructure with a 94% accuracy rate, stating that artificial intelligence was leveraged for review intel and analysis and gathering heat maps, facilitating resource prioritization. In fact, a notable example he gave was Anuman 2.0, a weather forecasting app that enabled army units to engage with precision across the border, highlighting the operational benefits of AI integration.
One question about using AI to locate infantry positions on the other side, he mentioned that the military relied on reasonably assured models and satellite tracking systems that provided real-time feeds, which aided in positional awareness.
Lieutenant General Sani also highlighted that the Indian Army has started incorporating AI into its core functions, and its effectiveness was demonstrated during Operation Sindoor.
The Indian Army has designated 2024-25 as the year of technology absorption, driving modernization efforts. This initiative has yielded significant results, including a 1,200% increase in users and 620% rise in data storage capacity, enhancing the Army's digital backbone. The Army is leveraging AI applications like electronic intelligence, collation and analysis system for threat identification and Trinetra system for situational awareness. Last year, the Indian Army established the Army AI Research and Incubation Center in Bengaluru that aims to accelerate AI project development through partnerships with DRDO, academia, and industry.
Now, India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh says that Pakistan is a jelly state. The comment comes at a time when Pakistan is battling multiple sectarian movements in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir as well as Balochistan.
Speaking at the launch of a new book by former Minister of State for External Affairs and veteran journalist MJ Akbar, Singh praised India's stability amid a fragile South Asian neighborhood. The Defence Minister also took a jibe at Pakistan, saying that the country remains unstable but also does not disintegrate.
आप साउथ एशिया के कुछ देशों की हालत देखें तो आप समझेंगे कि भारत कितनी स्टेबिलिटी के साथ आगे बढ़ रहा है। और एमजे अकबर साहब ने पाकिस्तान के बारे में अपनी एक किताब में लिखा था, पाकिस्तान एक जेली स्टेट है और जेली स्टेट एक ऐसा देश माना जाता है जो हमेशा अस्थिर रहता है मगर बिखरता नहीं है। आज दुनिया भी पाकिस्तान के बारे में यह समझ सकती है, लेकिन आज जैसे पाकिस्तान की हालत हैं उस संबंध में बिखरेगा या क्या होगा ये ऊपर वाला ही जाने।
Defence Minister Rajnath Singh also hailed India's economy. He said that India will become third largest economy by the year 2030 with $7.3 trillion GDP.
साथियों, वर्तमान में भारत दुनिया की चौथी सबसे बड़ी अर्थव्यवस्था है। भारत 2030 तक अनुमानित $7.3 ट्रिलियन की जीडीपी के साथ तीसरी सबसे बड़ी अर्थव्यवस्था बनने की राह पर है।
In other news, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has inspected a new type of destroyer.
And that destroyer, Jyotsna, showcases his intent to build up his country's naval strength. And this is also according to state media reports that Kim visited the Chohyeon naval destroyer at a military exhibition on Sunday.
The Chohyeon is one of two 5,000-ton destroyers in the North's arsenal, both launched this year as Kim seeks to ramp up country's naval capabilities. Images released by the North Korean state media show Kim being greeted by naval officers upon arrival and touring inside the warship. It also shows Kim overseeing a control room inside the ship with monitors showing the ocean around the Korean peninsula. Kim said that the Navy should be ready to thoroughly deter, counter, and punish the enemy's provocations. In May, a Chohyeon-class destroyer partially capsized during a failed launching ceremony attended by Kim, which the leader described as a criminal act.
His visit to the warship this time was part of a schedule that included attending the military hardware exhibition, which started on Saturday ahead of the 80th founding anniversary of the Workers' Party of Korea.
North Korea is expected to hold a large-scale military parade on 10th of October to mark the 80th anniversary of the founding of the ruling Workers' Party. And reports suggest Pyongyang might unveil its latest weapons during the parade.
Now, President Donald Trump on Monday claimed that there is virtually no inflation and no stock markets are continually hitting record highs.
However, Trump claiming no inflation on October 6th while demanding Fed rate cuts for a booming economy is contradictory. If growth is explosive and inflation is zero, why is there a need for emergency monetary easing?
In a social media post, President Trump said that good news for the holiday season, early prices are down, while tariffs are making our country an economic power again, adding that also virtually no inflation as stock markets continually hit record highs, the best of all worlds for the U.S.
Now, the president has repeatedly attacked Fed boss Jerome Powell for not cutting interest rates this year. The Fed did cut rates last month for the first time under Trump 2.0 on weakening job market. However, if the economic growth is as solid as the Trump administration claims, then there is no need for emergency policy like rate cuts.
Also, data shows that inflation rose to a 2.9%. It was higher by 2.9% compared to 2.5% last year. With tariffs already showing in many goods in the U.S., no inflation seems to be a tall claim. Separately, Moody's warned that the U.S. is on the verge of a recession. Moody's chief economist Mark Zandi also flagged 22 U.S. states with persistent economic weakness as the biggest risk. He said that the U.S. economy faces a potential contraction with 22 states and D.C. already experiencing recession. Additionally, the economist also warned that California and New York stability is crucial, while weak agricultural as well as manufacturing sectors contribute to the downturn.
As Andy said, and I'm quoting, the U.S. economy is still not in recession, but the risks are very high. We're on the precipice. And precious metals and Bitcoin are rising to new all-time highs this year.
Alongside risk assets like stocks, which comes as the US dollar is on track for its worst year since 1973, which signals a generational macroeconomic shift.
Well, back in 1973, the dollar's devaluation came after the collapse of the Bretton Woods system under U.S. President Nixon. And this year, central banks have shored up their gold holdings to a nearly quarter of their reserves at the cost of $1. Take a look at this next report for more on this.
The illusion of the traditional prosperity measures is breaking. Wall Street stocks are up 40% with over a $20 trillion rally since April lows. AI stocks have been the biggest winners. Gold is trading at new all-time highs, up nearly 50% this year for its best year since 1979. Silver has surged to a record high, up nearly 70% so far in 2025. Bitcoin hit a fresh peak of above $125,000 over the weekend, with $130,000 bets rising. But this is not a reflection of solid global economic growth. It is a flight from fiat currencies, especially the dollar under Trump's second term. The Federal Reserve is cutting rates into inflation, calling it a need-of-the-hour policy. The uncertainty from Trump policies and the ongoing US government shutdown is weighing on the dollar. The US currency is down 10% this year and is on track for its worst year since 1973. The dollar has lost 40% of its purchasing power since the 2000s. That is reflected in central banks' shift away from the dollar to gold in their foreign exchange reserves. Worries over inflation, deteriorating US fiscal health, Federal Reserve independence, and geopolitical instability are raising questions about the stability of long-term treasuries, traditionally the world's safest asset. In response, many central banks are turning back to that barbarous relic, gold. The fortunes of gold and government bonds have diverged sharply this year. That split was highlighted earlier last month. The price of bullion struck a new high and many long-dated bond yields hit levels not seen in years or in some cases ever. US Treasuries have essentially been treading water in global reserve portfolios in recent years. At the same time, central banks' gold holdings have mushroomed, thanks to accelerating demand and soaring prices. gold has recently surpassed the euro to become the second largest global reserve asset after the US dollar. For the first time since 1996, gold represents a bigger share of central banks' reserves than treasuries. Bitcoin has joined gold in the de-dollarization trend this year. The OG token surged to a new record high of above $125,000 over the weekend. Bitcoin is now the 7th largest asset with a market value of $2.5 trillion. The crypto token's allure is now driven by the macroeconomic factors, including the US government shutdown last week. The government shutdown began on Wednesday. That closed down operations at regulatory agencies and bureaucracies entirely or forced them to operate on a bare bones budget and minimal staff. The political dysfunction stemming from the shutdown has renewed investor interest in Bitcoin. The OG token is now considered a store of value monetary technology as faith in traditional institutions falters. The move away from fiat is not just a trend anymore, it is the new reality. Business Bureau, WION World is One.
And from the world of tech, Apple is facing an investigation in France over how it uses voice recordings from its digital assistant Siri.
The probe has been referred to the country's Office for Combating Cybercrime, and according to the Paris prosecutor's office, at the center of the investigation is how Apple collects and handles audio from people who speak to Siri. The voice assistant built into iPhones, iPads, and Macs, Apple has admitted it can store these recordings to improve its service, and that some data may be kept for up to 2 years and listened to by subcontractors known as graders to check accuracy. However, the company has clarified this only happens if users opt in, meaning they choose to share their data. But critics have argued that people were not always fully aware that their private conversations could be reviewed.
And the investigation in France follows a complaint filed earlier this week by a human rights group, which relied on testimony from a former Apple contractor in Ireland. The subcontractor has claimed that he had to listen to sensitive Siri recordings, which included private moments and conversations from cancer patients. Apple, in response, pointed to a blog post published in the month of January, in which it stressed that audio recordings are not saved unless users give permission. And even then, they are only used to make Siri better. France has taken a tough stance against US big tech, from investigating companies over competition rules to even imposing a special digital tax, which the US has criticized.
Over to sports now. Spain's La Liga and Italy's Serie A can now organize matches in the United States and Australia.
Yes, and this after European football's governing body, which is UEFA, granted them permission to stage matches abroad on an exceptional basis, though.
While expressing his reluctance to grant permission, UEFA President Alexander Seferin said that in a statement, and I'm quoting here, "While it is regrettable to have to let these two games go ahead, this decision is exceptional and shall not be seen as setting a precedent. League matches should be played on home soil. Anything else would disenfranchise loyal match-going fans and potentially introduce distortive elements in competitions."
This ruling also comes months after La Liga approached the UEFA after receiving the green light from Spanish Football Federation to stage the game between Villarreal and Barcelona at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens. Similarly, Serie requests permission to stage Milan's match against Como on February 8th in Perth, Australia, which the move was aimed at avoiding a clash with Winter Olympics opening ceremony at Milan's San Siro Stadium. However, these plans were met with strong protests from European supporters groups who call the moves absurd, unaffordable and environmentally irresponsible. No regular season league matches in European football have ever been staged abroad. Now, with UEFA's approval, both leagues will need FIFA to initiate the final procedures to grant authorization for the fixture changes.
Yep.
And from the world of entertainment, the spectacle for Vivienne Westwood show at the Institut de France began with a surreal stage.
And that's a lone cellist, an upside-down umbrella, and a rotating tableau of dying sunflowers. This theatrical opening set the tone for a spring collection overseen by Andreas Kronthaler, who joined the label in 2016 and took the helm after Westwood's death in 2022.
Kronthaler leaned hard into the madcap punk energy. The lineup was a collage of the unexpected. Punk details flashed in jeweled veil and glittering lapels. Models strode in floppy, swashbuckling 70s boots, turning the academic setting into a carnival. The clothing spoke fluent Westwood, built on draped and deconstructed silhouettes, gathered dresses with double skirts and tailoring cut deliberately off balance. Colors clashed on purpose with sour greens next to reds, a visual discord that eventually resolved into persuasive beauty. A jeweled neck necklace made the theme with literal chaos. Westwood built her name in the 1970s, wearing tartan corsetry and ribbed tees into the glamour of punk. That spirit still drives the house.
Kronthaler continues this traditional turning bourgeois classics inside out by warping jackets, loading corsetry into knits, and twisting tartan into a punk romance. This maximalist urge keeps the house's design language elastic and loud. In the past, the house often mined and mutated its archive from the 80s corset legacy to Napoleonic swagger. Now, since Westwood's passing, Kronthaler has pivoted from careful custodian to provocateur, focusing on new hybrids.
And that's all we had in this edition of World DNA. Stay tuned, lots coming up.
And before we wrap up the bulletin, take a look at these climate stories which are making headlines across the world. Stay tuned, you're watching WION The World.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
So today is a historic day for peace. And Prime Minister Netanyahu.
If Hamas rejects your plan, Mr. President, then Israel will finish the job by itself.
Israel would have my full backing to finish the job.
Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Prime Crime is your front row seat to darkness.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
Thanks for tuning to WION. I'm Samiksha Srivastava. Let's get started with speed news. Indirect talks aimed at reaching a final agreement on a US-backed peace plan to end the war in Gaza have begun in Egypt. According to Egyptian state-linked outlet, the first round of talks between Hamas and mediators concluded on a positive note, with negotiators set to continue their talks on Tuesday. The talks involving Egyptian and Qatari mediators are being held separately with both sides and coincide with the second anniversary of the 7th of October Hamas attack. Discussions reportedly include groundwork for prisoner and detainee releases. The US government shutdown has entered its second week, causing widespread disruption across the country. On Monday evening, California's Hollywood Burbank Airport, a key connection between Los Angeles and the rest of the US, operated without air traffic controllers for nearly 6 hours. Governor Gavin Newsom blamed President Donald Trump for the shutdown. Moreover, the shutdown has left most federal workers on enforced leave. Essential workers, including air traffic controllers, are still required to work but without pay. The battle for control of the US House is heating up in California as voters decide whether to reshape congressional districts. The proposal, backed by Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom, could add up to 5 Democratic seats ahead of 2026 midterm elections. This move is seen as a response to efforts by President Trump in Texas to secure 5 Republican districts in the same period. Illinois leaders went to court on Monday trying to stop President Trump from sending National Guard troops to Chicago. The move escalates tensions between Democratic states and the Republican administration over an immigration enforcement operation in the city. The Illinois governor says that 300 Illinois Guard troops along with 400 from Texas were said to be federalized for the operation. Pritzker has also called on Texas governor to block the deployment, which comes after a judge halted Guards deployment in Portland, Oregon. President Donald Trump has said that he is ready to invoke the Insurrection Act, a law that allows the president to deploy federal troops to suppress violent rebellions. Speaking from the Oval Office, Trump said that he would use the act if necessary, especially if courts, governors or mayors block his efforts to deploy the National Guard. Taiwan's defense ministry has reported that 3 sorties of People's Liberation Army aircraft and 7 People's Liberation Army Navy vessels were detected operating around Taiwan. The ministry said that they are closely monitoring the situation and have responded appropriately to ensure security. In a landmark judgment, the International Criminal Court has found the former commander of Sudanese militia, Ali Muhammad Ali Abd al-Rahman, guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity for his role in leading attacks in the western region of Darfur. The conviction comes nearly 20 years after the case was referred to the ICC by United Nations Security Council in 2005. It is also the first and only trial looking at crimes in Sudan in 20 years. Madagascar President Andry Rajoelina has named Army General Rufin Zafi-Sambo as the country's new Prime Minister, which comes after days of youth-led protests rocked the country. Rajoelina dissolved his government last week in an effort to calm the unrest, saying that the appointment was made with the wisdom to restore stability in the region. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has claimed that authorities foiled a false flag operation by local terrorists who attempted to plant explosives at the US Embassy in Caracas. Speaking on the weekly TV program, Maduro said that 2 unnamed sources revealed the plot, which he believes was designed to escalate tensions between Venezuela and the US over drug trafficking. Maduro accused the group of trying to provoke further conflict with Washington.